Hello and welcome to another episode of the Cole Memo. Today we're diving into psychedelic policy in Michigan with Julie from the Michigan Psychedelic Society. Just a quick note, every episode of this show is available ad-free for supporters on Patreon. You can sign up at colememo.com/Patreon, and it only costs $3 a month. It's a great way to support this show. Once again, that's colememo.com/Patreon. If Patreon's not your thing, but you still have a few bucks to spare, you can go to colememo.com/support and make a contribution of your choice, one time, monthly, or yearly. Every little bit of support is appreciated. And alternatively, if you're able, please smash that like button, share the show with your friends, and drop a comment below. All these little bits of engagement help to support the show and put the show in front of more eyes, which of course is always appreciated. The show will begin right after this message.
Here in the Midwest, growing amazing food isn't just a hobby, it's who we are. And that's why we created Envy Plant Foods. Whether you're working on a farm or starting a backyard garden, growing hot peppers for sandwiches, or cool lettuce for a chopped salad, Envy has the perfect plant food for you. Blended in Illinois since 1962. Support the Cole Memo and save. Get 10% off fertilizer for your wheat garden at envyplantfoods.com with code CHILL10. Plus, an additional 10% of your order will go to the Cole Memo to help fund the show. Again, that's envyplantfoods.com.
Thank you to the folks at envyplantfoods.com for their support. And if you'd like to get your hand on some federally legal cannabis products that can be shipped right to your door, go to drinkcantrip.com/ColeMemo. Here's a product that I personally love. It's their orange soda. It's 50 milligrams of THC. If you just heard me say that and you're like, whoa, Cole, I could not even drink half of that. That's okay. They offer plenty of doses, plenty of options for all people. They've got low dose, mid dose, and then what you might consider to be high dose, these 50 milligram options. They've got seltzers, they've got colas. Like I just said, they've got orange soda, they've got root beer, and they even just rolled out a Dr. Cantrip, which, as you might have guessed, is sort of like a take on Dr. Pepper. So if any of those sound good, go to drinkcantrip.com/ColeMemo. You'll get a 15% discount. 15% of your order will be kicked to me as in-store credit so that I can buy more of these delicious drinks, which I've come to know, love, and sort of take for granted. I really love these drinks, and I hope that they'll be here to stay. Just another option for you to help support me and this show. Once again, that's drinkcantrip.com/ColeMemo. Drink, DrinkCantrip.com/ColeMemo. And so it is now time for another episode of
The Cole Memo.
The Cole Memo.
The Cole Memorandum.
The Cole Memo.
The Cole Memorandum.
The Cole Memo.
The Cole Memo is what allows this whole thing to go on.
I mean, you have to respect the memo.
Hey, this is Tommy Chong, and you're listening and watching The Cole Memo.
Hey, Julie, how's it going?
Hi, Cole. It's going great.
Great. Do you want to go ahead and give yourself a little bit of an intro, and then I can maybe tell you background as to how and why I got connected with you?
That sounds great. Yeah. So my name is Julie Barron, and I am here in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And I have always been fascinated by non-ordinary states of consciousness, even when I was younger. And I was introduced to psychedelics and plant medicine when I was a teenager. And they really expanded my world and really helped me grow and change for the better. And I ended up going to school to be a therapist and also a music therapist. And part of my training was at Naropa University, and we learned how to work with non-ordinary states of consciousness through all different methods, through music, through trance states, through holotropic breath work, and being a lifelong plant and psychedelic advocate, I naturally just, sort of started doing some research about the history of their use and their use in therapy and their use in indigenous settings. And so, so I'm actually like master's level trained specifically to do this work, which is probably very unusual, more or less unusual these days. I'm not sure, but this was like 25 years ago. And so, I did more music therapy and regular therapy work in Colorado. When I moved to Michigan about 12 years ago, I really dedicated my path at that point professionally to psychedelic work at that point. So I've been doing this a little while.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, I'd like to have you break down the kind of state of psychedelic policy in Ann Arbor and Michigan, but I'll just tell you that kind of right there gives you a background as to why I reached out, but just a little bit more color for you. I had a friend to go to Hash Bash in Ann Arbor, and he was just telling me how awesome it was and how psychedelic policy, let's just say Ann Arbor is showing the rest of the nation how to do it once again. And by that, I mean, I learned that I believe, correct me if I'm wrong here, if you know more than me, which you probably do, not only being a local, but just being involved in this policy. Ann Arbor kind of led the way on decriminalization of cannabis. Yeah.
It did. Yeah.
And now they're doing it again with decriminalization of psilocybin. And, the scene sounded awesome, but instead of sharing anecdotes, I thought I might, boots on the ground to tell myself and my audience, what is psychedelic policy like in Ann Arbor and in Michigan in general? Because it's a little different across the state, right?
It is. Yeah, great question. I love that you brought up Hash Bash, because I went to my first Hash Bash when I was about 15 years old. And it was a very cool experience. It was unlike anything I had ever seen before at that point. We're talking about like 1987 or something. It was very, maybe 88. It was still very illegal. We were really taking a risk, but being very bold and, smoking weed on the diag outside in Ann Arbor, University of Michigan. It was so beautiful. It was so connecting and connective. And, Ann Arbor decriminalized cannabis, which meant basically that you could get a $25 ticket in Ann Arbor if you were found in possession of cannabis. And I think that started in the 1970s. And it was the whole story about, John Sinclair getting arrested for having a joint and facing like 10 years jail time. And so the community rallied around and started this, a rally. Now it's sort of like an event. It still has the rally part of it, the call to make change. But it started, I think it's been 51 or 52 years ago now that Hash Bash has been happening. And ultimately John Sinclair was freed. And so Hash Bash really became the center point, that yearly center point for the continued work towards liberating cannabis. And, here we are so many decades later, there is still work to be done with cannabis. It's not completely liberated. And I think the biggest thing that we face in Michigan now with the cannabis movement is how to keep it in the hands of Michiganders, how to continue to allow caregiver models, how to, keep it from, corporate capitalist money going outside the state or outside the country. And then we worry about the products that are being sold and the testing labs that have been found to be questionable at times. We worry about the products being sold because they can be remediated, meaning they can have chemicals, they can have bugs, they can have molds, they can have all kinds of things, heavy metals, and they can get remediated, meaning they can get treated and then pass testing and be sold. And so it's like, we're talking about like a medical cannabis program that we also have along with the recreational, and like some of the products you can get at dispensaries are not good. They're trying to still wipe out the caregiver model. They're just like attacks on all sides. So we are not done with cannabis, even though some of us have started pushing the needle in other areas. So, I'll tell you kind of the story. So I came back to Michigan, like I said, like about 12 years ago or so. I was coming from Boulder. I lived there for a couple decades. And I dedicated my practice at that point to psychedelic work. I started seeing clients, helping them prepare and helping them integrate psychedelic experiences. And one of the things I noticed was that just by having these conversations with a client, I'm putting them at risk, and I'm putting myself at risk because these things are illegal. And I'm trying to share information that I think would be the most helpful thing they could do for healing. And then by the nature of doing that, where I was doing that, it could be risky, meaning our safety could be at risk, our freedom could be at risk. And so that was really concerning to me. Also, my clients were very isolated. They didn't have anyone to talk to about this. They're part of the problem they were suffering was isolation. And so I had this idea, not a novel idea, it had been happening in some other places at that time, was to build a psychedelic community, like a psychedelic society above ground. And that people could find it and people could access it and they could get support and they could get information and they could find the others. And, we could create this really wonderful community. And then we could potentially work towards decriminalization or legalization so we won't be so much at risk. So I built this community because I couldn't find an above ground psychedelic community in the area. We built that. We started meeting in Ann Arbor because, of course, Ann Arbor is just the hub of more progressive thinking, more expanded thinking. So even though I wasn't living in Ann Arbor at the time, I thought, I know where I'm doing this. I'm doing this in Ann Arbor. It wasn't far away, So we did that, and we had this really wonderful Michigan Psychedelic Society, built it for many years. We were meeting, once a month in Ann Arbor and once a month in Lansing, and really like what was the substance of our meetings were these in-person gatherings where you could like tangibly sit in community with somebody else. It was really meaningful and really have these deep connections. And so part of the mission of Michigan Psychedelic Society was, working with, safe and responsible use and education and community and harm reduction and, navigating all these, these hurdles of stigma. And but one of the bigger ones was to decriminalize or deschedule or legalize psychedelics. And so from Michigan Psychedelic Society, we gathered a small subgroup. That subgroup came to be known as Decriminalize Nature Ann Arbor. And definitely was the same thinking of like, if this is going to happen anywhere in Michigan, it's going to happen in Ann Arbor, right? So we're going to do it. We're doing Ann Arbor specifically. And that subgroup happened to form at the same time that COVID hit. And when I said a minute ago that our in-person gatherings were like it for us, when we tried to move online, it just did not hold the same weight. And it just wasn't sustaining. And so we very quickly switched our attention at that point, which we had a lot of time at that point because everything was shut down. And even though the general consensus was like, don't bother us about these psychedelics because we have some real problems going on. Our entire world just shut down. And so the feedback, at least at the beginning, was like, don't even talk to us about this. But we didn't stop because we had time and energy on our hands and we were committed. And so the group of us moved forward and we started educating the community more. We started a 6-month education campaign to city council members. We just started building and fundraising and we adapted a resolution. We didn't write one, but we found the Decriminalize Nature resolution really helpful, and their support was also really helpful. The national movement that came out of Oakland And so we wrote a resolution and we found a champion on city council. And when it got to vote on city council, it passed unanimously. And this was September of 2020. This was like right in the center of like the height of the shutdowns and COVID. So that was sort of the beginning. You know, we passed in Ann Arbor. That was a really big feat. And then we helped 4 other cities in Michigan pass after that. We had Detroit passed. That was a ballot voter initiative. Hazel Park, Ferndale. Who am I missing? I feel like there's something else. Ferndale, Hazel Park, Detroit. Anyway. We tried in a couple places it didn't pass. We tried in East Lansing. We tried in Grand Rapids. And while they said they supported it as a city council, they support statewide and national movements. They couldn't go against state law to pass in those cities. So that was a little hit, but it was okay. And then we also have, we co-wrote 2 Senate bills, and Senator Jeff Irwin here in Michigan introduced those into the Senate over the past few years. Those got stuck in committee and kind of just died. But they were really great. They were decrim. They were just access for those who want it, grow, share, you know, that kind of thing. No commercial, no selling, no commercial sales, like that kind of stuff. No regulated healing centers. It's just like access. And then you could pay somebody for services like care or support or spiritual counseling or, you know, something like that. And so that was that. And then the big thing we did was we attempted a state ballot campaign. And I will say that I'm not a politician and I've never done any advocacy or political work before this, but I'm really committed to this work. And I don't know other tools that work quite as good or quite like psychedelics. And I feel like it's unethical for me to not because I know that it's unethical for me not to tell other people that and not to work towards having these things be more accessible for people. And so I don't know why I went off into that tangent, but it was because, I don't know how to do any of this political stuff. I was never, into politics. I didn't understand how this works. So I learned everything that we're talking about. I learned with the people that were doing it with me and by reading and listening and pulling in all the right people to work together. But having said that, there were things that I spun wheels, because I didn't always know. I didn't know how to really use the power of volunteers well, and I didn't understand the process and how expensive it was. And, so anyway, we had a grassroots-led attempted ballot campaign. We got it approved by the state, the language. We got the signature pages, and we started, getting signatures. We didn't have a lot of time left. It was kind of a quick thing, but we did it. We got about 80,000 signatures. We needed 340 verified signatures. We got about 80,000, which is good for an all volunteer signature gathering movement. But
are you saying you got 80,000, but you needed 340,000?
Yeah.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. We thought we had more funding. We had been promised funding. That funding didn't come through in the end, unfortunately. But because we needed to pay for signature gatherers, and we thought we had that funding, we didn't. So in the end, we got 80,000. We learned a lot. It was a good grassroots campaign, but I got really burnt out, and so I kind of stopped doing advocacy work at that time. That was a couple years ago.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So that's kind of like the history of where we have been. And that burnout, there's a little story in there that I can share with you.
Please.
About the burnout. Yeah. So, a little story. I can just share with you about sort of what happened there and why we're a little bit more in a standstill in Michigan, in my opinion, is because I got burnt out. I I gave my all. I'm still working full time and giving my all running a state ballot campaign after having done all the other work that we were doing. And I just, I gave financially, I gave personally, I gave energy, I gave professionally, I just gave everything to try to make it happen. And went through a stage of burnout where I just couldn't do anything. And I left the organization, the Decriminalized Nature organization. And through that process, my co-director that I was working with ended up being the director because I left. And I think he was also really burnt out and trying to keep it all together. And he brought in some people onto the board, and those people ended up underhandedly taking the organization away from him, unfortunately. And what has happened since is nothing. I would hope that like people who, if the work was really the important thing, that they would then continue the work, but that has not happened. So it just fizzled out, like just nothing happened with it. And they were, as opposed to like trying to like get information from us or learn from us or anything, carry on the torch of something that we had started, they turned around and started accusing us of like financial, it's like stealing money, and like that we were in it, because we were just trying to defraud the psychedelic community. And it was craziness. It was crazy. So having turned on us, and then not ever doing anything with the organization or really, getting anything going in the state, it kind of has fizzled out. That's Decriminalized Nature Michigan, that group specifically. And I bring this up because what I'm sad about overall is that there are some bad actors. There are people with a very wide range of why they might be doing something that is hurtful to other people or hurtful to the community. That could be from they believe something that's not true, like maybe they believed for some reason that I was, stealing from the organization, or someone has something, they're mad at you. Like we had to fire a volunteer once who did some really crazy stuff, and they were really upset with us. They like came after us, or like anything in between, like all the way to the extreme of like people who are like hurtful. In the psychedelic community, unfortunately, in the wider psychedelic community, we see all kinds of really interesting dynamic. I don't want to judge people, but like people on all ends of the spectrum in every way, and different levels of emotional health and stability. And so we have some people on one end who like want to do damage, are hurt either by you or by something else, and this is representing them, and they want to come at you, and they want to tear you down, and they want to call the police on you. They, like really intense stuff that goes on when you take leadership positions, and especially for some reason in the psychedelic space. So we deal with a lot of stuff. And my whole thing on that is like, the work is what's important to me. Like I do this like as a personal passion and as a professional passion, because it's meaningful and important to me that it happens. And so I think when some of these bad actors come in, I'll tell you in a minute why it's even heightened for me at the moment to talk about some of these bad actors. When the bad actors come in, it takes your time, energy, and away from the actual work, and you get really distracted with whatever bullshit they're presenting you, or trying to defend yourself, or whatever. Yeah, I don't know how much you've seen of crazy stuff like that or not, but it's.
I mean, yeah, we actually I just had a discussion with the person that connected us, not only on the topic of shout out to Gene Lacey from the Illinois Psychedelic Society, about burnout, but also about like kind of the purity testing and the just craziness that you experience in the psychedelic crowd. And I will even add the cannabis crowd. And it does sound like you're dealing with different circumstances than I do, because you're in more, both of you and Gene are in like a leadership position where you're pushing policies forward, and therefore if somebody disagrees, they put it all on you.
Right.
And I think some of my shock comes from the idea that I just assumed wrongly, I guess, that we would all be on the same page. You know what I mean?
Yes. Me
So,
too, Cole. Me too. I assumed the same thing because I'm like, wow, I am so open-hearted and so doing this because I think so highly of it and I'm so passionate about it and I want anyone who has, who wants to have access. Like, I am truly in my best self and most open-hearted with this work that I do. And it was such a surprise to me each time it comes back in a crazy negative way. It really surprises me.
yeah.
Yeah. So like when this whole thing of like when a decriminalized nature Michigan got taken over, and then folks started attacking me for something that wasn't complete, but was completely untrue. I was just like, what? I was like really frozen for quite a while because I was like, what is happening? But this most recent thing, and that does kind of continue because these people keep trying to disparage my name and contact boards that I'm part of and try to get me removed. Like they're like years later, like still attacking, But this most recent thing is really interesting. This was I don't know if like Jean mentioned this or you've heard this in other ways, and this is definitely absolutely true of the cannabis movement too. This is not new. Is the censorship on social media. And so just in the past like 3 or 4 days, 60 very large psychedelic organizations have had their social media suspended, and then some of them permanently removed. And we're talking like big names. Michigan Psychedelic Society is like a tiny name in that. We're talking like Shakruna and Psychedelic Science and Psychedelics Today. That's the podcast I was just on. We couldn't, we were supposed to live stream on the Facebook. We couldn't, right? Because their Facebook page has been removed. Like there's a really big thing going on. And I know this happened in cannabis. I know it was actually probably worse with cannabis because it was like the first like substance that we were trying to like work towards legalization with. And it was legal in some places and not others. And that's still the case. And so there was even with CBD, there was like so much censorship. And so we saw a lot of that, but so it's happening again now. And we were all gearing up to like get an attorney or we still are doing these things and like to like write a letter and approach Meta as like this really big, community, global community psychedelic network. I had this crazy thing happen yesterday where I got this email where somebody admitted to reporting all of these groups actually, that they caused it, that they're targeting all these groups and trying to get them eliminated. And this person admitted to also, and I don't know why they sent me this email. It could have been in error, to be honest with you. They could have meant to send it to someone else and accidentally send it to the person they're trying to report. You know what I mean? Like they're trying to take down. Like that was what it felt like, because it wasn't like, it was so bizarre. And they also admitted to like actually calling the police on ceremonies that they know are happening. Like if someone's like advertising an ayahuasca ceremony, they'll actually call the police and give them the time and date. So like this person, and I don't know this person at all. They don't even live in this country. Like they're so far removed from my existence. I don't know how they even know about us. They probably just searched psychedelics, and like got all the orgs and accounts. But having done some research on them, they've done some really bad damage actually to people and gotten people in trouble. And it's just bizarre. It's just like weird stuff where you're like, what? Why is this happening?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So all kinds of weird things where like you feel like you're doing really good work. And like you said, and kind of like you do these things and you assume everybody agrees with you because you think you're doing good. But not everybody does. There's been concern from like Indigenous Americans, right, about taking this medicine and regulating it and removing it from the hands of like, people who are using it spiritually. There are people who believe that nobody should ever make any money, from a substance or for, sitting for somebody who's doing a substance. That's, everyone has their own viewpoint about it. And I don't think anyone's particularly wrong. But I think the ways that people go about having their viewpoints known and heard when they're like actually attacking people and actually doing harm to people and calling the police on people, I think that reaches another level.
Right. If I could say a quote really quick, and I can, if you're curious who said this, I'd be happy to tell you, but I'll just lead with the quote. Quote, "One of the things I do worry about sometimes among progressives in the United States, and maybe it's true here as well, is a certain kind of rigidity where we say, I'm sorry, this is how it's going to be. And then we sometimes create what's called a circular firing squad, where you start shooting at your allies because one of them has strayed from purity on the issue. And when that happens, typically the overall effort and movement weakens."
Oh my
End
God.
quote.
Oh
And
my
that's
God.
that's actually a quote from former President Barack Obama.
Wow. That is so right. Oh my goodness, that is exactly right. And that's what I said. I'm like, the biggest upset thing about the fact that like these folks tried to take over our organization and then didn't do anything with it. Right. So it's like the reason I started that was because there's nothing happening in Michigan right now. Like, it's so unfortunate. I shouldn't say nothing. There's a House bill that might be introduced, you know, for folks who have PTSD with psilocybin. But that's exactly the point, is that we start infighting and then nothing happens.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, it just, like I say, is really unfortunate when it damages the whole movement overall, or stops the movement, you know, which it sounds like you're running into. So
that is exactly right. And it's really interesting. You know, I went for a few years when this happened with the organization here in Michigan. I didn't talk about it publicly. I was personally devastated. I was already in burnout, so I wasn't handling much very well at the time. And then these attacks started coming to me, and I didn't speak up for myself. I mean, I did speak up for myself. I, you know, proved the things to be untrue and, you know, all of that, but I didn't speak out publicly. And I kind of feel that way now about this thing where I'm like worried this person from Europe is going to start targeting me and being crazy, and, you know, so there's a tendency to, one, not want to talk about it. And part of that is I was just so burnt out originally, but part of it is like because I want to protect myself, because, you know, there's no validity to the things that are being said, so why would I broadcast them out? It's like, you know, but then, like I said, there's levels to which people are going to go to, you know, for harm. And there's a certain point where you have to stand up and say, this is not okay. Like, this happened and this is not okay. And the balance of how much time and energy do I spend addressing it? Because this is exactly what the Obama quote was. It's like, that can take over your time and energy. That can take the focus, as opposed to the focus actually being on the work that you're doing. And so there's this, I've been trying to navigate this. I've been trying to figure out, where is the line? How do I stand up for myself? How do I let other people know publicly that there are some bad actors out there, without becoming a worse target for them, without feeding, you know, some people are looking for you to get angry and you know, and then fight back, and then that gives them fuel. So I feel like sometimes I'm like walking on eggshells around psychopaths.
I've been fortunate not to have, you know, I've had some online haters or whatever, but fortunately none that, you know, I don't hope I don't jinx it, but I've not had the cops called on me. I have not had, you know, people following me around like that. But what you know, it's like rule number one in this movement is like, don't call the cops on people, even if you disagree with them, because this whole movement, like, look, you should be able to use your words and reasoning to settle disputes, to, you know, settle debates. And look, if you have a different view, and it ultimately is not resolved through a debate or through just, you know, dialogue, then start your own thing and try to bring whatever you believe to be the reality. And again, rule number one is we're not calling the cops on each other, because this whole movement is about, you know, whether or not your life literally gets taken, it could get figuratively taken because of what the police can do.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So when you're threatening something like that, and the email that came yesterday threatened that, and that's a point where it's like, yeah, you've taken it too far, where you're talking about someone's safety and freedom, and that's a big no-no. That's a big no-no. Yeah. So that just became on a whole nother level of, oh my goodness, what is happening? You know? Yeah.
Well, that's insane.
Yeah.
I want to get back to the psychedelic policy, but just because you brought this up and, you know, you're willing to talk about this, is there anything else that you kind of want to say with regard to this? Like, it sounds like you're still actively dealing with it, but the reason I ask is just in case there's other people out there, and hint, there are.
Yeah.
And I don't mean, let me clarify,
Okay.
other people dealing with what you're dealing with. Because again, this, when you brought this up, like, yeah, the depth that this person seems to be going to is definitely shocking and unique. But I guess what I'm saying is, you know, even our friend Gene has dealt with a little bit of this where, you know, like disagreements and it becoming personal when there's no need or reason to make it personal. And again, I ask this not so much to dwell on it, but just in case there's another advocate out there from California or insert state here that might, you know, benefit from any knowledge you can impart.
That's a really great question. And I'm really still trying to navigate this. Like, again,
Sure.
like that concept of like, I'm walking on eggshells around psychopaths right now. And I like, that's what it feels like. And I'm not exactly sure, because I don't know what level of sociopath or psychopath I'm dealing with all the time, that I don't really know how to do it. But one thing I will say is, the more that I speak about it, which is a newer thing, the more that I am finding out that other people are dealing with the same thing. And I just heard from someone today who said that, you know, they're very prominent in the psychedelic movement, and they've considered leaving. They're still considering leaving the movement completely, because they have been approached by so many sick people online, attacking. And this one was interesting, because it wasn't somebody threatening to do harm unto the person. They threatened to kill themselves if this person didn't respond. And so, like, there's something unique about, I think it's unique about the psychedelic movement, that it is, and I don't know if it's because people are using psychedelics and they're having a hard time, or they have a very strong opinion about psychedelics and haven't used them, but there's something about this movement that's attracting some really crazy energy. And those of us who are in leadership positions really need to be talking with each other and supporting each other, because it really feels like I'm dealing with this stuff alone for years. And as soon as I came out and said something, I could not believe the response of the people who are in similar and even bigger psychedelic leadership positions that have been quietly and sometimes more publicly dealing with some of this stuff. And I had no idea. And so I think what I'm saying is, where safe, talk about it. You know, if it doesn't need to be a public thing, reach out to other psychedelic community leaders and ask for support and ask for help. Because one of the things that this most recent thing with this social media censorship that's happening at the moment, I believe due to reporting, is that all of a sudden, you know, we're able to, because this person emailed me, we can look them up and see who they are, and then we can network with our global psychedelic community and see, do you know this person? What, you know, and then you start to get some answers like, oh yeah, this person is problematic. Oh yeah, we've been affected by this person, right? And then you start to like have some strength in numbers. So I think that's the best thing I can say at the moment. And again, I'm still navigating and figuring it out. I don't know what the best thing is to do. I also sometimes think, why am I doing this? I could easily walk away. But my passion for it, and it's so important to me that I've stayed with it. And I know other people feel that same way.
Yeah, there are times where, I mean, that was the conversation I just had with Gene on the podcast. It's like it would just be much easier for me to just shut my mouth and walk away. Like like I don't know. It's a tough. I'm also working through some of the thoughts you are, and so for those reasons, I don't have the answer. But this just came to me. This thought just came to me,
Okay.
and I just can't help but wonder if this is something that happens, and we've seen it. Everybody says history repeats itself or it rhymes or whatever. I think this is what happens sometimes in civil rights movements. And this is what this is. I mean, people try to silence you. People will threaten your life, your livelihood. And we've just, again, I'm not trying to get too, it's funny, I don't have to worry about getting too hippy dippy with you. So we're kind of on the same page. But you get what I'm saying, where it's like we've seen this happen time and time again in the civil rights movement, which is, I think drug policy is, I think it's fair to say it's a carryover because it disproportionately still impacts, certain people. And
yeah,
I just view this as kind of a continuance, for lack of better words, of what we've seen in that movement.
And it literally is a continuance. I mean, literally is a continuance, right? Of why the drug war started, was targeting people of racial minorities, right? That was the whole point. So thank you for saying that. It is a literal continuance of that. And we're talking about liberation, right? And that's the same issue. Yeah, thank you for saying that, because I'm gonna do some deep diving into civil rights movement a little bit more, because I've been trying to navigate this without having a place to navigate from. And I think you just gave me a really great place to maybe get some navigation from. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, honestly, I'm going to look into it too, hoping that I can benefit from any wisdom some of the past civil rights leaders have been able, if they have imparted. I'm sure there's something out there where it's like, I hope there's something out there. I think there's something to learn, I guess is my point.
I know there is. It's going to be a great place to look. Yeah.
Rabbit hole. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, anyways, I want to get to like kind of what psychedelic policy looks like in some of these cities that you've helped to decrim. But I just want to say before we close this loop that we'll definitely have to follow up with each other, and just out of like, I want to make sure you're doing okay, and I'm maybe the feeling's mutual, so I'll definitely have to keep tabs on how you're doing, and if you learn anything, please reach out, and I'll do the same for you, because it sounds like we're going through similar I don't want to call it struggles, but that's how it feels right now. I think we're learning similar lessons.
That's a great way
Does that sound better?
Yes, that sounds better. And I agree. And I would love to keep that going, that connection going.
Yeah. And hopefully we can pass that on to people that might be listening. I hope that the discussion we've had so far is helpful for people, and maybe they can also go look up, do some research on these movements in the past, especially if you're an advocate. I hope that this is helped. So like I say, before I shift gears to kind of what psychedelic policy looks like in some of these cities, did you have any other thoughts? I didn't mean to do a hard shift. Okay.
Oh no, that's perfect. Yep.
Cool.
Sun-Drenched Farm is the manifestation of my dream to be able to provide for my family through offering natural alternative forms of healing and wellness, the same forms that I've been so fortunate to experience on my journey in healing from Lyme disease. With in-house cultivation, solventless extraction, and final product manufacturing, we're able to offer the highest quality product that you can find now at sundrenchedfarm.com.
Well, my friend, so he went to Hash Bash, right? And he was just like, dude, this is crazy. Cole, you should have come. I'm so regretting that I didn't go. I'm going to plan it out next year.
Good.
And I got to go, because he was just like, bro, cannabis is just openly being sold. Mushrooms are openly being sold. There are police standing next to the booths where all of this is going down, watching it go down. He was like, I got some chocolate bars, I got all these different things. I could get delivery if I wanted to. And it's just like, wow, it sounds like you're in a different world right now. And so
That's hilarious.
can you color in it? I know that was a pretty colorful like description, but like, yeah, what's it like in some of these cities where you've decrimmed?
Yeah, Michigan has a really fascinating culture that's going on here, because what we have is decrim in 5 cities and a county. So Ann Arbor happens to be in a county that also decriminalized, right? So we feel pretty protected within this county. There's been this long thing going on with Hash Bash, where at first it was like a public nuisance, and they were, there was always like, we had this many arrests. And so like, if you watch the newspaper headlines over the years, you're going to see the dynamics playing out in those headlines about like this nuisance and these terrible people, and we're arresting, and there's violence, and the violence was often created by the police, but there's this shift that has started to happen. And by the way, Ann Arbor is a really lovely place to be, and Washtenaw County. I mean, we are so incredibly supported by our city council, by our county commissioners, by the sheriff, the county sheriff, by the county prosecutor. They speak at our events. Like, they are actual supporters of ours. So we have a very friendly stance going on here, and it's been building, and you can watch the headlines from Hash Bash over the years, because it is now, in my opinion, they haven't said this publicly, but it is now my opinion that the goal is to have no arrests at Hash Bash, to have no problems at Hash Bash, to make no scenes, to have it go as chill and casually as possible. Because they have realized there are no problems at Hash Bash. Like, there are minimal problems at Hash Bash. This is not a drinking event, right? This is a weed smoking event. And so one of the things that's always happened, I mean, this is just part of the culture of what Hash Bash has been as long as I've been going, since 1988, is there is so much weed for sale. There's so much just stuff for sale. And I'm sure there probably always was some of the psychedelics for sale too. But once decriminalization hit in Ann Arbor in 2020, it just, the diag turns into like an open market, open drug market, really. And the police are there to provide public safety. So before the events that happen, the people, the organizers, and I participated in some of these meetings before, the participants, the leaders of the event are meeting with the police department, and they're meeting with, they have these meetings that we're having. So we talk about, what are we doing for safety? What is their job? Their job is public safety. They're going to intervene when there's a problem. And they've asked us to try to minimize, like, the people who actually are allowed to have tables, who are not selling substances, have a little certificate. And then we go around and we're like, hey, I don't see your certificate. We're so happy that you're here, but we're asking that you don't, that you just, you don't have your table here. This is University of Michigan property. But like, we try to be so kind, and we're just like relationship building. And there's a point where it's like, people aren't listening, and like, what are you going to do? And the police are like, they're just like, we're here for public safety, and like, it's actually turned into like a beautiful, beautiful thing. And the big thing now is there's no arrests every year. And it's like a celebration for everybody, the people putting on the event, the police, the university. It's like a really great thing for everybody. But part of that is building that ahead of time, and building those relationships with folks ahead of time, and making sure they understand that we want to put on a really amazing event. And our goal is to work with them and to be supportive. And so that starts well ahead of time. And so that is so, like, yeah, it's really cool. What I will say about when decriminalization passed in Ann Arbor, it's for personal use, it's for growing, it's for sharing, not selling, and you can transport it, so it's not illegal to have it in like a car or something. And then a few months after that, our Washtenaw County prosecutor, who I love, Ellie Savitt, decided that since it's decriminalized in the biggest city in the county, that he's just going to decriminalize the whole county. And he basically said the prosecutor's office will not prosecute for anything involved in these, particular entheogenic substances. And so it became countywide at that point. And we have a new elected sheriff, and that sheriff, again, like they all speak at our events, so they're all like supporters, and they're all really like just wonderful. They want to end the drug war, and they know that it's damaging. So we're in a pretty good spot. But what I will say is that while it was just basic decriminalization that's happened in here in Detroit and Hazel Park and Ferndale, all these other cities, it doesn't stop people from pushing the envelope. So like there are places you can go to in Ann Arbor and buy mushrooms, and when you go to the Diag on a certain hash bash day, like you're going to see like open sales, and there's delivery services, and like that is not included in our decriminalization language. And we're finding this in Detroit, we're finding it all over. And people, when they come from places like Oregon or Colorado, where they're in like even states that have like legal access, like they cannot believe the culture that's going on here. So it's interesting. And people keep pushing the envelope. They keep pushing a little bit further and a little bit further. And so far, we have all been very safe, and our freedom has not been at risk. And I'm really thankful for that. And there is a part of me that worries that, I know the county and the city aren't going to do anything, but like, will the state, at some point come in? And so it's, I love that you noticed that. And it's definitely like a real thing that's happening here.
That's so cool. That's so cool. I have a lot of different ways I could go, but I'm just curious. And I know that this might be hard to like conjure up what has been said, but you mentioned a few times now that sometimes like people in law enforcement will speak. Like can you give me like the gist of what they'll say? Like typically?
Yeah, happily. We need to end the drug war. We all know that these psychedelic substances are healing, and they should be accessible. I mean, they just straight up come out and just say the facts, like we say when we advocate for them. They're good for addiction. They're good for PTSD. They're all these different things, and they talk about the racial disparities in our legal system, and specifically the drug war and targeting racial minorities. That's the basis of it. They are advocates for what is good for the community, but they also realize that criminalizing this is actually making the problem much, much worse.
Yeah, that's refreshing to hear. We have police in this state of Illinois where they're, fighting tooth and nail to keep a concept with odor-proof containers alive. They're saying, well, we must be able to search vehicles if a car smells like cannabis. And it's just like, not even, real quick, not even burnt cannabis. We're talking unburnt cannabis. They are fighting for their lives to be able to continue to search. Like you'd think if they were going to fight for anything, they'd be fighting for the smell of burnt cannabis, because
right.
that would
consumed. Right.
You would assume, right, that it was consumed.
Right.
But no, they have literally said they want to be able to search on the basis of the smell of raw cannabis, because if I can smell raw cannabis, then you likely are trafficking a large amount, and we still want to battle trafficking of cannabis. And it's just like, geez. So to hear law enforcement actually understand the value of decriminalization and the point, which is to make their jobs easier, to keep them, safe and
and I
focus
will say
on public
that
safety,
the exactly. And the prosecutor that is the Washtenaw County prosecutor now that did this decriminalization countywide is running for attorney general. And I am so with it. I'm so happy. Attorney General of Michigan. What was I going to say about that? Oh, I can't remember. I was going to say something else, but I can't remember.
We were talking about law enforcement fighting for
That's crazy. Like that is just crazy that that's happening. Yeah, because we should be moving in the very other direction. And it's crazy that, law enforcement's fighting and spending money fighting for something like that. It's big crazy. Money. Yeah. So we're pretty lucky in this area. I know that's not true of all areas in Michigan, but I mean, what's happening in Detroit is some of the similar stuff. A lot of churches coming up, some mushroom dispensaries, and, some places that even sell like DMT vape pens. And like, nothing really seems to be happening. There doesn't seem, and they're very public.
I was going to ask about that. Like, do other psychedelics kind of fall into the fold, or is the decrim measures you've passed, are they only focused on psilocybin, and these are just kind of people pushing the limits?
They're
like
not
what?
Actually. The decrim measures that were passed include psilocybin. They include mescaline containing cacti. They include iboga, and they include plants that contain DMT.
Oh, well, that's lit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So we are seeing like DMT vape pens and, stuff like that in some of these shops, and probably likely, all over Hash Bash. And that one's a little bit more concerning to me just because DMT is so potent. I'm not concerned about it, but I just hope people are doing really good education and advocacy around, how to use it and how to be safe with it.
Yeah. And are there, I know this might depend on the county, but just generally speaking, are there possession limits for psilocybin?
No.
Rock on.
Yeah, no, there's no possession limits. But so it's not included. We chose not to include limits specifically. And I will also tell you there's no age restriction in this decriminalization language. And that was on purpose. And but again, because it's just decriminalized, ultimately, because it's not distribution, well, I shouldn't say distribution, sales are not included, that it would be a sticky court case, if you had a fair amount, because it could just lead towards distribution or sales.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and please don't take what I'm about to say personally, but a few times you've said just decriminalization, and I love just decriminalization. I feel like I'm learning more and more that I'm like, again, audience, I'm saying this to my audience now. Audience, don't take this the wrong way, but kind of fuck legalization. And I mean that by like,
Cole, I am with you.
Yeah. You get what I'm saying?
I am with you. I'm completely with you.
From your perspective, can you break down the difference between decriminalization and legalization, and maybe why you share where I'm coming from? I'd be happy to elaborate on my stance too, if you don't color it in yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So decriminalization is just basically removing criminal penalties for something, which is great because there shouldn't have been criminal penalties to begin with. So it just means you have access. You can take it, you can grow it, you can, all the different things. Like legalization is making a regulated framework for it, right? Which means that, and oftentimes does not include you can grow your own, right? You would have to specifically include that you could grow your own or share it with a friend or something, right? So the legalization model is a regulated model. It either is going to be like recreational dispensaries, cannabis dispensaries, or it's going to include a regulated model, right? Like in healing centers, right? And so far they've been very expensive and have a lot of really funny rules and limits to how much you can take and all that stuff.
Yeah. And again, I was probably being a little nitpicky, but the reason I said what I said was because sometimes people, when they talk about, I don't know where this started happening, but sometimes people seem to view decriminalization as a baby step towards legalization.
Oh,
and it's like, no, decriminalization is the end goal.
Exactly. It's actually like just perfect, to be honest with you. It's right. Yeah. But at the same time, so here's something that I say a lot. I say a lot that like, I don't want to pick just one model that I happen to like and say that this is going to work for everybody. Because my goal is that everyone has access in the way that works best for them.
Yep.
And so for some people, like I know people who will never take psychedelics unless they're in their therapist's office or unless their doctor is supervising or unless they're in a regulated healing center. And I know people who would never take it in those situations and would only take it alone or only take it in a religious or spiritual setting or only take it at a festival or a community. Like everyone's access is different.
Yes.
And I want to be able to include access for everybody in a way that works for them. So while I personally think decriminalization is the best model, and that's why we started with that and did that, I am not trying to work towards something like legalization. I don't really want that, to be honest with you. Because I don't want it going in, in the hands of corporations. And, like we just talked about at the beginning of what people are dealing with cannabis and, and remediation and all the, and I'm all about us keeping it in our hands. It's our medicine. It grows in the ground. You know what I mean? Like all of those things, but I do think there are different models that work for different people. And if my goal, which I say it is to include as access for as many people as possible, then it might have to include many different models.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, and I should clarify, I sort of said fuck legalization like comedically, and it's only because it's just because of this experience that I've had, like specifically in Illinois, but in other states where my audience has probably heard me tell this story hundreds of times, so I'll keep it short for you and for them. But like my first experience going to Colorado, I remember I was so excited. It was actually like on the eve of my 21st birthday. My 21st birthday had come and gone, and I was feeling a little unsatisfied because everybody made a big deal about the 21st birthday, and I had a beer that night, but I've never been a huge drinker. And I was like, man, this is kind of underwhelming. And I got to thinking about it, and I was like, how far away is Colorado? Because I'm 21 now, and that's at the time it was the closest state that had legalized, and which was far still, but again, the closest. And I looked, and I was like 14 hours away. I've done a 12-hour drive. Like, let's go. That's 2 hours more. We can do that. So I went there, got a bunch of cash, and I was like a kid in a candy store or an adult in a weed store, however you want to. And I was like, I want an ounce of that, a chocolate bar, a drink. And they're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. You were over your limit with the first thing that you said. And I was like, the thought that came to mind was like, it's like, oh, it's legal, but it's not that legal. And that's when you get what I'm saying? And
yes,
that's when I started to realize, I was like, oh, well, maybe legalization isn't, look, I'm not saying it's bad. It's great. It was really cool that I could, Google Maps a location.
Yeah.
You want to talk about access. Like that was sweet.
Right.
That was really cool. But those shortcomings, that's what's really fixated me on some of these things. Like you said, the idea that it can be legal to purchase limited amounts at a store, but you can't cultivate it at home. Like little things like that really catch me up. And so that's where that like kind of ingest comedic, I was trying to be funny by saying fuck legalization. I don't truly believe that, because like you said, I think all modes of access are great, and you got to meet people where they are. And sometimes where people are is they want to Google, where can I legally buy mushrooms?
Right.
And drive there,
Right, exactly. That they're not in a place where they have grown their own at that moment or whatever it is,
or
right?
have
and
buddies,
in
the space where they can, get a gift of mushrooms. Like sometimes people are just like, they read a headline on New York Times and they're like, maybe I'll try mushrooms.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah, and I think what we have seen, what capitalism has done, what out of state PAC money to get these laws changed, and then to bring in big business and sell shitty product and drive prices down. Like we've seen it go really nasty, so it's hard for us to be like, yes, legalization. It's hard for us to get on board with that. And also it's like, it's not exactly what I'm going for, but I do want to be open-minded. And like I said, I do want to, try to find ways that there's, good access for everybody. And so I think we can have a balance. At least I have this vision, this belief that we can have a balance.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think there's got to be a balance, and it's just sometimes the way you can see legalization take form can be a little sinister. I've seen people argue against the way Oregon's done it or your home state, Michigan, has done it. People will say, well, don't do it like Michigan because they let everybody participate. And then the price of cannabis got so low that nobody could make money. And it's like, hey, no offense to people selling cannabis and trying to make money, but I don't really care if you can't make money.
Exactly.
Like, that's not what this was about.
It's not what it's about. So that's the bottom line right there. It's not what it's about. So I don't want to set up a legal dispensary system for mushrooms. It's all about making money, because like that's like the antithesis of this entire movement.
And if you're gonna make money, it should be, I don't even know if I'm about to use this word correctly, so here we go.
Okay.
Commensurate, is that the word? It should be equivalent to the value of that
Oh,
product. You get what I'm saying?
yes. It shouldn't be like gold. It shouldn't be like selling gold.
Yeah, and that's exactly what it feels like they're trying to do, like by limiting participation in states like my own, where they say,
Exactly.
no, we're going to limit licenses for people that can grow because we don't want to be like Michigan where it got so cheap. And it's like, no, let the value fall where it may. And I'm sorry,
Right.
but it's a mushroom or it's a plant.
It's a plant.
And
This is
just
a
like every other
plant.
plant that's on sale at the grocery store, it's generally pretty cheap.
Yeah.
You know,
exactly.
generally.
Exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, to me, honestly, and the word deregulation has been thrown around a lot. And I really like the idea of like, can we get psychedelics and cannabis unscheduled? Can we get them, oh, that was the word. I'm sorry. Unscheduled. Can we take them off of the controlled substance list?
Yeah.
Can we treat them like a mushroom that grows in the ground, or a plant, or an herb or something like that? And when people are like, oh, but it's dangerous, and I think of things like, let's think of like scuba diving, or let's think of like fire. Fire's not illegal, but it's very destructive. Riding a motorcycle, like these things are not illegal, right? Scuba diving actually is quite dangerous, but there's ways to do it safely. And actually, you can get a certification by taking a little class, getting certified in scuba. So we have ways of dealing with things that aren't as extreme as what we're trying to do with plants and fungi. And it's crazy making the extreme regulation that is attempted and happening with these substances.
Yeah. And to sort of piggyback off of something you said at the very beginning of this show and what you just said now, is that we have the right to engage in all of these dangerous activities. And if we want to call ourselves a free country, we should have the right to explore these alternative modes of consciousness.
That's right.
And honestly, regardless of whether or not they're safe, because safety is not the point. Right. Yes. The point is cognitive liberty.
Yes, swimming in a lake is my choice. Do I want to swim in this lake? Can I swim? Well, that's up to me, right? I get to choose my level of safety with it, like riding a motorcycle. It's exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I like you. You're fun to talk with.
I like you too. Yeah, this has been a lovely conversation.
Yeah. Well, I guess before we go, because we can start to wrap, but what do you view as and I realize that given some of what we discussed, it may be hard to answer this question, but what do you view as like our next steps here? Like, like it sounds like you agree, we both agree on like sort of I don't even want to call it two-pronged approach, because it's possible that there's another prong. Mm-hmm. But like, yeah, how do we move this cause forward?
It's such a good question. And, coming off of pushing so hard and going into burnout, I really am approaching this differently at this point. And a little bit more from the feminine perspective, which is just really going slow and thinking about how can I like put nutrients in the soil instead of planting the seed or even just like planting a plant, a clone, and letting it grow. It's like, how do I start by building the ecosystem of the soil? Right? What can I do? What kind of things can I add? And so to me, that's the work that I want to do right now, which is, and so what does that mean? Like in terms of what we're talking about, like to me, that means reducing stigma. So one of the things we're doing at Michigan Psychedelic Society is I have a practitioner work group, and we are writing a guide. So it's doctors, nurses, therapists, licensed practitioners for the most part, and we're writing a guide about how to legally and safely let practitioners talk to their patients and clients about psychedelics. What are they legally allowed to do? What is a little bit gray area? What is risky? And we are going to approach the boards, the medical board in the state. We're going to approach the psychology board in the state. We're going to approach these different boards, and we're going to ask questions, and we're going to get an idea of where do they stand on these things. And then we're going to build a guide, because one of those things is like, practitioners are scared. They're scared to talk about it with their clients and patients. They don't have the right information. They don't know what they can say and don't say. And so that's like one of the steps that we're taking is how do we like disseminate really good factual information and get people more educated and get them feeling more comfortable about having these discussions. So that's one way that I think like nurturing the soil. The other part is about really building a very wide network of community and leaders. So, in the states that we live in, right, in Illinois and in Michigan, we have some general city areas, right? And then we have a lot of the rest of the state, which has tons of people that could be part of our mission. But we have to really get a wide net of building psychedelic community, not just working towards legalization and decriminalization. Building psychedelic community, building those networks and connecting the networks all across the states that are already built and connected. And some of those can be building upon the cannabis movement that's already there and that we've learned so much from, and we continue the work of maybe, like you said earlier, maybe that's the civil rights, maybe that's civil rights groups, right? But it's really strong and not super fast, getting people to know each other and so building community. So that's another thing that we're working on. We are, what else? Continuing to work on the citywide decriminalization, because even though our goal is state, there's little ins that we have, and it's so much easier on the city level. And so we're working with different cities like Jackson, Michigan, and there's been a couple others who've expressed interest. And we've been working with them and their city councils. And so the more cities, the more open-minded places that, cities that can pass, the better. So those are the kind of the things that I think about. And like I said, I have the urgency because I want it to be done grassroots with like the people who like are the residents of Michigan who like want to say what we want to happen in Michigan and not have outside interests come in and put money down and then control it. But at the same time, I've also learned that too fast and too much doesn't necessarily work and can really lead to destruction and burnout and, divisiveness. And so I'm taking a very different approach.
Yeah. And I know we're about to close, so I apologize if this opens up a whole other loop, but I'm just curious, have you faced, and I'm not talking about the circular firing squad, people that should be on our side, but are some, have you faced other opposition, like from like prohibitionists, basically?
Very little. I'm like surprisingly very little. Yeah. Even like I told you, when we went into those city councils and we weren't able to get them to sign a resolution, most of them agreed that it was good. Most of them were like, we will we're not going to sign this resolution to decriminalize it in our area, but we're going to sign a resolution that says we support this as a city at the state and federal level. Like, so there's been a lot of support. We have not come up against a lot of prohibitionists yet. And, that's part of it coming out more and getting more widely known and more possibly potential to pass, is that we're going to come up against some of that. And that's to be expected. But to be honest with you, we have not seen much. It's more of like the infighting like we were talking about before.
Yeah. And maybe we covered this already, but just another question that came to mind. Maybe it's the infighting, maybe it's, like I said, what we discussed already, but what's the worst thing you think has come out of this? I know that's probably a weird question to answer, but just wanted to throw it out there.
No, I think I can answer that. There is a thing that happens in spiritual communities and in psychedelic communities and in religious communities where there's a hierarchy of power, and there are people who are vulnerable and there are people who have power. And unfortunately, there are people who abuse power. And there are people that have bad intentions who go out to cause harm. And in the psychedelic community, that looks like a really egomaniac ayahuasca, leader who like leads groups and then like, gets people to give them all their money, or like engages in, sexual intimacy while somebody's under the influence, or people start to believe that they're their spiritual guru, and the imbalance of power. And so we do see this in the psychedelic community, and unfortunately putting people in altered states and then trying to have sex with them, or get them to do things they normally wouldn't do, unfortunately happens in this space. And so while, like I said earlier, I come into this and I build this community organization because I think it's going to be so wonderful and positive, and it's all about connecting community and good things happening. And then we deal with something like this, And so that's a pretty big problem in the psychedelic space.
Yeah. And please, don't take this the wrong way. I'm not trying to downplay that at all, but I just wonder if that is just something, like you said, that comes with the mixture of power dynamics, spirituality, trying to better yourself. And when you have people involved, again, with, like you described, with ulterior motives, or maybe just not good motives.
Mm-hmm.
That's where, because you hear about things like that within, not to use a cliche example, but the Catholic Church, where arguably no drugs are present at all, but it's still that idea of, there's a crossover. I feel like there's a Venn diagram, and I'm not a religious person. I was growing up, but I am no longer. But I see this Venn diagram of the way people approach religion, and maybe even the way people approach psychedelics, where they're trying to better themselves. They're trying to learn. And like you say, if you just unfortunately get under the wrong person, or whatever, get surrounded by the wrong people, unfortunately people are still people, and those things can happen. So again, I hope that did not sound like I was trying to downplay it at all. I was just
not at all. I agree with everything you just said. I completely agree.
And we'll end it on a positive note. What do you think is and we may have already covered this too, but what is the best thing that's come out of this?
I'm going to have to say connection. Connection is the greatest thing. As much as that we see those bad actors, and maybe even people who aren't intentionally being bad, but are unwell, and out of balance. The community connections, the relationships built, the support for one another is the absolute greatest gift of all of these things.
Well, that's awesome to hear. And Julie, I really, from the bottom of my heart, and on behalf of my listening audience who shares my values, our values, I want to thank you for the work that you've done. You really are leading the charge. Like I said, Ann Arbor and all in Michigan, they're leading the charge once again, showing us how it should be done. And thank you also to the folks that work with you, if they happen to be watching as well, because I know it's your response might be, it was a team effort, but I wanted to make sure to thank you and the team, if you will, for what you've done to fight for what I'm going to call meaningful reform in drug policy.
Thank you. And I really appreciate that. I receive that. I pass it on to my team also. And I also want to honor and recognize all the people that have been doing this work before me, and all the movements that led to this, especially like we talked about civil rights and cannabis movement. I'm continuing the work that's already been done.
Yeah. Well, hey, keep fighting the good fight. And folks, I hope you found as much value as I did in this conversation. We'll see you on the next episode of the Cole Memo. Julie, thank you again for joining me today. Did you have a good time?
I had a great time. What a lovely conversation. Yes. Thank you so much. Thanks for everyone who's listened and will listen. And thanks, Cole, so much for having me.
Yeah. I'm going to holler at you next time I'm up in Michigan.
All right. Sounds good. Please do.